the guests a couple of days ago, and it was so much fun. And I've been watching so many of the episodes because the lineup that Amber has brought together is phenomenal. Folks from all sorts of industries who have had successes that are great, but also have wisdom from all different sources. And the conversations have actually even brought more of that out from people, and seeing the connections between people. It's just been really cool. And I'm so glad Amber dove deep on this in a hurry when, hey, by the way, we might be facing something unprecedented. Why don't I throw together a 3-week collection of amazing people, which, Amber can do in about 1 hour from midnight to 1, which is apparently what she does. So we have another amazing panel, and I'm going to introduce everybody. But first, Amber is with us. I don't know if she can even say hi, but Amber, please at least wave. Can you speak?
Hi, everybody.
Okay. And that tells you everything you need to know why I am talking and she is not. So I get to guest host because of that malady, which, if you can imagine, here's one of the things, and I'm going to ask you guys on the panel about your family situations, but as an empty nester, this has not been hardly a real change because my wife and I both work from home until our 20-year-old son had to move back in. But Amber, you've got a toddler and you have no voice. 3-year-old. That is phenomenal. Good luck with all that.
It's very difficult.
Yes. All right. So I'm going to start with Steve. Steve, welcome to the show. Steve Drum, and tell us a little bit about yourself. I was reading you guys' bios, and I was very intimidated by the fact that we've got 3 grown-ups on the show. But tell us about yourself and where you're calling from and what makes you you. And he might be muted. Unmute yourself. Okay. We cannot.
He's just trying to be like me.
Yes, exactly. We cannot hear you, so we're going to move on to John. Hey, John Ramstead, how are you?
Good. We got to get a comm check there with Drummy. Drummy, work on that.
Yeah.
So, quick background. Married 30 years. Every one of my kids is under my roof. They're 22, 21, and 16, plus my son's fiance, plus our 2.5-year-old grandson. We are all here.
Wow.
And it is awesome.
That's
great. I got to tell you, we've had a blast. We've reconnected. We're playing games. We're going for walks. We're watching movies. We're reading books together, and we're all working together. So it's been a ball. Honestly, it's been a blessing and a silver lining in the midst of a storm. How's that?
That's great. And that's what we're all looking for right now in these really strange circumstances. That I was having a conversation. I'd love to hear. Some of my friends were saying this might be the most memorable thing in our lifetimes. That certainly probably 9/11 took that up until then. But is this even more? And you've seen a lot in your career and your life. What do you think?
I think it's going to be more, just because I believe that this is going to fundamentally change how we do things, how we work, how we connect, how we serve and support each other, right? I mean, like what Amber's doing, right? Her immediate heart was like, how do I serve people right now without pitching them things, without selling things? How do I just pull together people that have something to say that could be of value to somebody, of help, of encouragement, maybe a new idea that they could act on? And I think that, what it does, it starts to help have the focus go out. Like our whole family voted today. And I'm sure there was no other motive other than to help. We're in a lockdown here in Colorado. And they said, Dad, we should order Chick-fil-A because, those people need to be appreciated. We need to give them a big tip. And, we need to support the local businesses. And I said, well, is that the case, or do you just want Chick-fil-A? And they couldn't believe that I questioned their motives. But but we ordered Chick-fil-A, and it was really cool. The Grubhub guy came by, and we gave him an extra tip. And
nice.
But yeah, so And
Nice.
I think Steve might be online now.
Yes.
Yeah, I unhooked my speaker, so we'll see if that audio might not be as good, but yeah.
You sound great right now, man. So, Steve Drum, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks. What are we talking about again? No.
We're talking about you. All about you.
Yeah, so I just retired from the Navy back in November. Was just starting to get some traction as a speaker when this happened, right? So, like all of us, trying to find a way to pivot, to adapt, to be relevant, and bring in content to people, you know, if that looks somewhat different. So yeah, it's 27 years. Most of that as a Navy SEAL.
Wow.
And it was a great journey. It was a lot of fun. And the last couple of years, I spent co-developing a program for the Navy called Warrior Toughness, basically to get our young sailors and officers tougher. You know, and you know, we throw around the term resilience a lot, but this is a big, broader, you know, more encompassing program beyond just resilience. And so I was lucky to be a part of that. And I take those lessons and I translate them and deliver them to other people that could be served by them.
Wow, that's fantastic. I love when I see ex-military, retired military taking all of the leadership lessons that they learn and translating them into any environment. And because when you guys, and both you guys have military histories, and I want to hear a little bit more about each of that. When you guys are making decisions, you're working with the most extreme possible consequences. It's not just, oh, we might lose our jobs like so many business owners are doing right now. It's, oh, we might lose our lives. And in so many ways, working under those extreme circumstances actually does sharpen your toughness, your resilience, your decision-making capabilities, your ability to live with mistakes and criticism.
Testing, 1, 2, testing, 1, 2.
John, we can hear you.
Oh,
we can hear you just fine.
Great.
What's up, Joe? You gotta love live TV, man.
Absolutely. Welcome, John.
I didn't realize when I was testing and recording that it was live. So my apologies.
But your voice was so sweet. We loved to hear it anyways. So that's awesome. Hey, I want to take a pause just for a second and say a little bit about our ultimate host. I'm just subbing in here, but Amber does so many things for so many people, particularly those of us who are speakers and authors and thought leaders. And that's really who she sets out to serve, because what she wants to do is find people with great voices, both literal and metaphorical, about their content, who are really want to become kind of the levers that move the world, if you will. And what she does is come alongside and through and building websites and doing incredible book launch, and even training your assistant to do the marketing for you so you don't have to. She does that and so much more. And so it was a very logical thing for her to start this Elevate series, because she knows so many of us and she's helping so many of us get a broader reach. So I'm thrilled that she did this. And what I'd love for everybody who's watching is to start a watch party on your Facebook page, which invites all of your friends to watch this. Amber's very excited. She cannot speak with anything but a horrible sounding growly
squawk.
whisper. Yeah, a squawk. I like that. That's good. So do start a watch party, and we're going to try and give you guys some of the wisdom that we are learning from the people we work with, from our own material that we've been developing. And I love to see how we might be pivoting both in our careers and in our messages going forward. So we've heard from John Ramstead. We've heard from Steve Drum, and now John, and I didn't get how to spell your last name, but is it Ruhlin?
Yeah, you nailed it. Yeah.
Okay, cool. So tell us about yourself.
So I guess the simple answer would be I'm a farm boy from Ohio who figured out from a mentor early on when I was 20 interning with Cutco that if you're radically generous with people and do it strategically, the doors of the entire world can open to you if you're willing to play, not in most people's long game is days, not decades. And so we applied some unique principles of generosity because I looked at the mentor. He was 60 at the time. I was 20. I'm like, in 40 years, I want to be him, because every deal came his way, oil wells and banks. And he was an attorney, but he made all of his money in other things. And I modeled that. And Cutco's worked with in 70 years about 1.5 million reps and distributors. And by the time I was a senior in college, we'd become their number one out of 1.5 million.
Wow.
This country bumpkin, green, didn't have the right connections. And so we started to get referred to pro sports teams. We 25 pro sports teams. So the core of really giftology is it's really just a synonym for love. If you love on people, and Paul was great because he would say things like, the extra scoop of ice cream means more on a bad day, which was his way of saying if you show generosity in the valleys, it means 100 times more than on the mountaintops.
Well, how much is that playing out right now?
Yeah, well, you find out when your back's against the, find out who's got your back, right? I mean, that's and so it's not fun. I've almost lost my business through 2008, 2009. So I feel the pain that people are feeling right now. And we've been fortunate because of the type we haven't been, at least not yet, has affected. Everybody's been affected.
Sure.
But yeah, the core, we wrote a book called Giftology, and it's now, in our lane, we're the only kind of category niche of how to use gratitude and gifting, not as a check the box once a year at Christmas, but as a year-round, life building strategy for all relationships that are important to you.
Wow. Well, here's what I love about this whole Elevate series is it's not just a business thing we're doing. Now, I personally am thrilled to hear from each of you. For myself, selfishly, it's interesting you said about generosity, because every year I have a word that I want to develop, and it just so happened my word this year was generous. And one of the things I did to create a more generous spirit within myself was I started taking improv classes, because it's not like comedy where you're trying to be funny. In improv, your whole goal is to make the other person look good on stage. Because if you step out and try and say a funny joke, the crowd doesn't actually like it. What furthers the scene is if you're actually making the other person look good and feel good and seem like and then they do the same, and it's amazing. But even if it's not reciprocal, it still looks good. And that's so I want to know more and more about giftology. I love the word.
Hey, I gotta throw a shout out for John though, Hal.
Okay, please.
I did some work with a pastor who's new in town and doing a startup church, and John, what he did as a thank you, he gave me the book Giftology and a Cutco knife that we still have downstairs.
Nice.
And just through that and this generosity back and forth, his name's Keith Boyer. He's become one of my closest friends in the world, and I think it's undergirded by what you have and what you wrote in your book. And I read it, and I've brought it out into what I do and how I do it. And this is the first time you and I have ever met. So I just think it's so cool that you're out there impacting people in a positive way. That's why our company is called Beyond Influence, right? Because you are leading beyond your own influence with people you don't even know, and making a profound positive impact, developing relationships. So I just wanted to share that with you because I think it's really cool.
Thank you. Awesome. You just made my day. My love language is words of affirmation. So I never get, and I'm an introvert. Good. So I'll keep going.
Yeah, you can
just
right, man.
Keep going.
It never gets old for me.
No.
Thank you for that.
Yeah.
That's amazing. So cool.
That's fantastic. So I'm interested because John Ramstead, you didn't tell us much. You told us about your family, married 30 years. Congratulations. Condolences to your wife, but congratulations to you for that. But you didn't tell us much about your company or what are you doing professionally?
Well, let's see. Company. Well, I was a Navy pilot, flew F-14s all the way back in the Gulf War.
That's just so cool.
It was fun.
I'm amazed.
And then I was supposed to go to Top Gun, and then I got hit in the head with a softball. I'd like to say it was like a surface to air missile. That would be a way cooler story. I should maybe just go with that one. But then got into business, did 3 tech startups, ended up at a Wall Street firm, Fortune 100 company, and then went to start my own company in another one in 2011, and had an accident that put me in the hospital for almost 2 years, had 23 surgeries.
Good Lord.
Yeah, it should have been fatal, but that's actually what set me on the path that I'm on now, because I was laying there in my bed and realizing that it should be my funeral next weekend. And this was when I was 45 years old, and just took stock of what my life meant at that point. And I'm like, you know, God, if I get a second chance, I want to use it to live completely differently. Instead of being focused on trying to be the king, I want to move into a role of helping other people be, you know, to succeed. And that's what we've built. I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing today, which is leadership coaching, training, speaking. I just wrote a book. So a lot of things are going on, but you know, with everything that's happening now, right? Everything's come to a dead stop.
Right.
But I see this though as a period of time though that's going to. It's kind of like when I was a fighter pilot, right? And somebody would fire a missile at you. We had something in the back of the airplane called chaff, and what it did, it exploded, and there was this huge cloud of little metal pieces that would confuse the missile, and it would hopefully blow up back there instead of hitting your plane. And I think right now, in just the environment that we're in, with some of the anxiety and fear, and some of it's well founded though, but there is a lot of chaff out there that as leaders, we have to cut through the confusion. We have to lead our families. We have to keep making decisions for our business, looking at how we not sell things right now. I think it's more, and Amber is such a great example of this, right? How do we be in service of other people and add so much value that over time that just comes back around as business gets back to normal? But I think that's kind of how I'm thinking about all this as I go through it.
Yeah. And
just trying to be calm in all this. I know we always had a motto, and I think it was something that the SEALs always talked about too, is that calm is contagious.
Yep.
And being calm, even when you're not confident, or you don't know maybe the best decision to make in the moment, is still going to be really helpful to the people around you.
One of my core messages as an author and a leadership consultant is that when you are calm and present, you become a calming presence, even if you don't know. And I've been on the phone with a lot of my clients. It's been really, really busy because so many of them most of them are small business owners who, all right, I got to lay off the one guy, 350 people. It's going down to 30. What's the message that I give? And he wants to sound decisive as a leader, but working on his tone was actually the most important thing. Even when you're telling people bad news, you can tell it in a way at a pace that they can actually tolerate, especially when you want to say, because this is maybe the situation you guys are in, but that you would like to hire people back as soon as this comes back, but you don't know. But learning how to stay calm, even when you're saying, I'm not sure about that. And I'm interested to hear well, I've got so many questions. I want to know, so each of you guys have people around you professionally that maybe are looking to you for guidance. What's the messaging that you have found to be the easiest heard? Whatever the message that has landed the best when you're talking to those immediately around you about the fact that, like you said, John, business is coming to a halt. So Steve, what have you?
So one of the things that we use in the military are specific processes and frameworks, right? You know, so when you have the most junior member of the team whose back's against the wall and they're scared, what can they fall back on to say, all right, well, let me pull out this cheat sheet. Okay. Here are the things that I need to consider. And so I think when we look at trying to bring calm to a situation, trying to bring focus, we need to take a second, we need to take a beat, take a pause, and look at our intentionality. Where exactly do we want to go? Because we're all in a variety of different situations, right? Some people have had to dim the lights on their businesses, right, until this thing clears up. Other people, their business might just be evaporating, and now they have to find a way to be relevant and a way to be useful. And so it's a simple exercise to step back and say, okay, how can I add value? How can I add value for the sake of helping other people? How can I add value to, create a business model for myself? Once I do that, let's get a clear picture of what that end state looks like, so we can start building that roadmap, a roadmap consisting of close, intermediate, and more distant goals, where we can step off and say, okay, are my actions or my behaviors still aligned with where I'm going as a person and where I'm going as a business? And so I think really adding structure and considering the broad context of what we want to do, as well as the comprehensive nature. Let's consider all of the things. Let's consider, all right, what are the different skill sets that we need to invest in and adopt to do something new for us, for the speakers, for those of us to give that kind of message. Now, how do we pivot? Now, how do we take our content and disseminate it to people because we can't get in front of a crowd, right? Or face to face. So
what I love about that is what you're looking for is, well, what are some things we can focus on? Even what are some certainties we can depend upon, even in the face of more uncertainty than maybe any of us have ever imagined. One of the things that my wife and I keep talking about is how the days seem so long. The time is creeping by because we don't know what we're going to hear the next hour. I'm kind of waiting for the first celebrity to die from this, and what will that do to our collective psyche? And it just, everything's and so you're so much uncertainty. But what I love is you're saying, well, that's how life works. That's how missions work. We're dealing with that all the time. What can we depend on? We can depend on decision-making processes. We can depend on processes to develop focus and set goals, even in the face of all this uncertainty. I'm guessing
and
you had to, sorry, yeah, you could follow up.
Yeah, just one thing. I think a lot of us are in a situation where, for those of us who are not directly impacted, meaning like our job hasn't been crushed, like we don't have relatives that are sick from this virus. Mm-hmm. We sometimes maybe struggle to talk about things as seizing opportunity, right? Because that looks like we're negatively exploiting a situation. Right. But if we look at like our soldiers that go to combat overseas, we're at war right now, just like we have been in a military sense. And we don't expect people to stop living their lives when we go overseas to fight, right? We want that to happen. And so we want people to continue to go about their lives as best they can, because that's how we advance as a society, right? But we still want to be mindful of those that are in the struggle directly. And we want to be making sure that we can leverage, ways to support them, the law enforcement, the doctors, the people that serve us with food and things like that.
Or the Grubhub delivery people, the 100%. Mailman, I was talking to him, he just delivered stuff. And how are you protecting yourself from doorknobs and whatever else? It's interesting how many people that we depend on that we don't even notice, who are still depending. We're still depending on them. And I love that you're being conscious of those people also. Well, I was going to ask John, in your experience as a pilot, dealing with all of the uncertainties, what are a few things you were always able to hang your hat on, the things that you could hold on to? What processes worked best for you in so much when you're fraught with danger and faced with uncertainty?
Well, I'd echo what Steve said. It's your training, your processes, but the other thing, it's the people around you. Right? You get to know and trust them, and just kind of like what we're doing here. One of the things that I think we always did in the military, in our briefs and our debriefs, we had a thing, there's no rank, right? We're going to give each other feedback. We're going to be honest. We're going to be vulnerable. We're going to be authentic. And I think right now, is whether it's our family or whether it's our employees or people on our team, this isn't the time to try to do some big heroic move to be, the great, leader. This is a time where I think you need to really be honest and share with people. There's oftentimes you have to make a decision, right? And you don't have all the facts. So you have to make a decision, and then you have to make another decision and react, and another decision. Yep. And I would much rather, like for myself, right? If I know that based on where my business is, I might have to lay you off, Hal, in 2 weeks. Yeah. I'm going to be sharing that with you right now. And here's what my numbers look like. And here's what my plans go. Instead of 2 weeks from now going, hey, dude, I really tried to make it work, but I just want to let you know, I got to cut you loose today.
That is so good.
Because people are afraid to have, right? Because people are afraid to have that conversation because it's not comfortable, right? We don't like to be bears, but I think it's our relationships. I think it's, what we've done up to today to prepare. Mm-hmm. I also think this is a period of time that we need to double down on being curious, focusing on learning, reading books, listening to people. Beautiful. like as far as the virus goes, I don't just watch Fox News or CNN or MSNBC. I actually look at everything to try to distill the facts to actually figure out what's accurate.
Sure.
What is the most accurate information I can get to make decisions for my family versus being given it to me. So
Sure.
I've had to talk my mom into turning off the news.
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
She
I
just
have to
calls me freaking out.
because that's all, I mean, and that's the way the medium has developed, is that's all they need. That's all they can do, is try and find something that can grab your eyeballs. And it's usually the most panicked thing possible. So I'm curious, the other John is how much has this affected your business, and what have you been able to tell those closest to you about that?
Well, I mean, we speak about 20 times a year. It's so we've had 5 big events that have canceled that, it's lost revenue.
Yep.
But it's not the major source of our revenue, fortunately. What I'm a big believer that in either doubling down on relationships and the world falls apart and, like things don't matter anyway. And so I tend to be the optimist of like, we're going to figure things out. Like there may be a new normal. Yeah. But I've talked to, like, one of our clients was a regional sales manager at the Hilton, and they're getting like 60 cancellations a day. And so he's losing commission right and left. Yeah. And he's like, we're going to use giftology here. And I said, great. Who's hurting more than you are? And he said, the event planners. They're getting their face kicked in.
Interesting.
And I said, well, let's send them gifts. Let's love on them. They're not in a good spot either. Everybody hates them right now because they're canceling, and everybody's looking to them for answers. Nobody has answers. And they're the person that they're usually taken for granted, and they get all the credit, negative credit, and very little of the positive credit. Yeah. So they sent out 40 gifts to all of these event planners at Fortune 500 companies. And they responded, I mean, like in tears, saying, you're the only person that said and done anything nice for me this entire month. Wow. And in some cases, they said, hey, the contract for 2021, we want to push it next year through procurement. And so what I would say is, if you're a speaker right now, I would double down on anybody that you've spoken to or for in the last 3 years and go back. And those people are probably in a worse spot than you are. Go love on those people. I mean, it could be a video, could be a handwritten note, could be a gift, could be anything. But I think going and doubling down on the people that probably are in worse pain, or that maybe don't have as much experience with this or perspective. But I think there's power in being able to come outside of ourselves. And in his case, like, he didn't do it. He didn't think that it would actually result in this, but it resulted in a couple $1 million in contracts coming back because of that. And at the end of the day, like, when you can go to the people that are in worse pain and say, hey, I want to help you here, even if it's just a word of encouragement, the loyalty, everybody thinks they have loyalty, but loyalty is built through rough times, not good times. Yeah. And whether it's a marriage, whether it's, partnership, whether it's business, whether it's clients, like, usually that, like, things are forged in the fire. And so what I would say is that we want really, I call it active loyalty. Most people have passively loyal relationships that stick around for if things are easy, but the people who are actively loyal will go to war with you. And they'll go fight for you, whether it's your family, your kids, your best clients, your partners, your vendors. And so I think that right now is a good time to reach out even to people that are close by and say, hey, how can if what I offer is not what you need right now, the biggest pain point, how can I put something together that allows for you to win right now? And I think long-term, we come out of this way better than what we went into it.
That's really, really good. And that's because it's easy to get, I'm a speaker and I've lost $100,000 worth of gigs so far. And it's easy to get the woe is me. And now I love the idea is thinking about how can I actually reach out to people who canceled and understand that they're going through a hugely difficult time as well. And most of my gigs are with the DoD. I work with the Army and the Air Force a lot, teaching relationship and leadership stuff. I've been doing that for like 14 years, and they've just canceled absolutely everything. And that stuff might not come back, but those guys are working tirelessly to try and make decisions with whatever resources they have. And what would it look like for me to get outside of myself, as you said, and think about what's going on with them? Because there's nothing we can do about the situation that actually brought it. It's not like they rejected me personally. Right?
No, not at all.
They might after they hear me, but they haven't yet. So that's, I really like it as well. And Pilot John, you said something about, if you're going to lay me off, say this is do it quickly. One of the greatest pieces of wisdom I heard years ago was bad news never gets better with age. So do it quick.
That's true, right? Yeah, like I think you should invite people up into the cockpit with you and show them all, like I did with my entire team. I said, here's all of our financials. Here's revenue I know is coming in. Here's how long I can afford to pay you at this level.
Right.
Here's some adjustments that we might need to take. I helped, and Amber knows her, somebody on my team, work with some other people that needed some help to kind of fill in some of the work that to make some back work. So I'm trying to do everything I can to serve them and just be transparent, but also make the best decision for the business and the family long term also.
Wow, I love that. One of the principles I get to teach is, I call it delegate the anxiety. Don't just send out tasks and then you worry about the whole mission. Why don't you delegate the anxiety and share the situation as it is, because they're already anxious.
And they'd come up with some great stuff. I said, hey, I don't have all the answers. I've never lived through something like this. I've been through 9/11. I've been through the internet. I lost a company when the internet bubble popped. It was gone. I lived through, the 2008 crash, and I was in a Wall Street firm. But this to me feels very, very different.
Yeah.
And I think it's going to be a longer tail on the backside. So, it's interesting because I think a lot of the places we would typically go for mentorship, for counsel, for advice, they don't have a lot of relevant, practical experience. And that's why I think things like this and, Steve's perspective and John's perspective and things you're sharing is so important, because I think it's a bunch of people actually all trying to figure this out as we're walking through it.
And that's one of my clients, when he was saying he's going to keep on as many people as possible, but he just said, look, we got to reduce salaries 20% across the board indefinitely. And one of the things he then came up with, which was so helpful, was he was able to say, look, there's so much beyond this I don't know. What I do know is I wouldn't want to be going through this process with anybody else. That's what I do know. I'm confident of the people in this room. And that message was, and you said it earlier, I'll call you Pilot John, you said about the people, right? It is processes that we have, but it's also the people we have next to us. And, as the other John has talked about, being generous with those people, you're talking about remembering them and welcoming them into even the decision-making process and that transparency. So I'm curious, Steve, and maybe this is just an unfair question, but whenever you hear Navy SEAL, you got such a reputation for being in difficult circumstances and yet still being able to make decisions. What's one thing from an outsider? We're curious that what are conversations happening when you don't know so much, when there's things you just can't absolutely give with certainty is going to happen?
Well, and I think, for you to be effective, and I like to talk about performing on the X, right? The X being that moment where you're patrolling through the mountains and the enemy shoots at you, you're on the X right now. And it's like, all right, what do I do right now? Okay, well, your ability to succeed is largely dependent on what you've done up to that point. How you've prepared, what things you have considered, your contingency planning. So while many of us feel like we're on the X right now, let's also consider what do we have to do to be ready for tomorrow, okay? Because this thing's not probably going away in the very near term. So let's walk this up, okay? Let's walk this out. If we want to be effective tomorrow and that effectiveness looks like this, what are some things where this could go sideways? Let's try to contingency plan a little bit to see, hey, this could go in different directions. Let's at least make sure that we start considering that. Not necessarily that we have all the answers, but when we're in that situation and we're like, we're not completely flat-footed, we're not deer in the headlights, we have that mindset that's gonna lend itself towards agility. So,
and I like that, because you're talking about anticipation, not expectation. Expectation is my emotions get tied to one particular outcome, but anticipation means, well, what are all the possible outcomes that we might face tomorrow?
Well, and just like, emotions give us, like, we get scared, when we have anxiety, those are signals that our body's giving us, right? And they're signals for us to be useful. Now,
Yeah.
they're not good or they're not bad. It's how we, take that signal. Just like when we look at what's going to happen in the future, it's not good or bad. It can be good or bad if we look at, all right, if we start really thinking about all the terrible stuff that could happen to us, that's not useful. Okay.
Yeah.
But it also doesn't serve us to just think like everything's going to be great and not face it. So let's take a very measured, deliberate approach to how we anticipate the challenges we have and how we can be effective in those moments.
So now let's make it more personal. So I'll stay with you. Steve, in your personal life at home, what are tangible, practical things you are doing now in order to be as prepared as possible for tomorrow? Because we're in week 2. The Wuhan is going to relax their lockdown on April 8th, which we're excited about, but they started January 23rd, and New York City is on week 2. Are they going to last 10 and a half weeks? So what are some, and quickly, because we have 10 minutes left, what's some things you're doing to help you prepare you and yours for the short and long haul?
I think, like anything, what are some basic stocks we need in our house, but it doesn't mean going out and hoarding. It doesn't mean like, oh my God, I got to go out and buy guns and ammunition, right? If we have no training or experience with that, right?
That scares
I mean, everybody, I believe in the
me.
Second Amendment. That's me, but let's think what actions are really going to serve us? Is 86 rolls of toilet paper going to really serve us? Or is it something more practical? Okay, we got some food, we're investing in relationships. But one thing I think everybody, no matter where they are, can use to be better is practice meditation. I know it sounds like maybe it's cheesy to some people, but that's something we all can do. Meditation is going to help with our emotional regulation. It's going to strengthen that frontal cortex when scary things happen, and it's going to enable us to be focused on the things that are going to get us through the situation. And not react blindly in panic.
Love it.
Investigate it. Do it.
And I've gotten to make over 250 visits to military installations around the world. And meditation is becoming talked about like exercise, which is great. We're losing the stigma to it because we're recognizing it's exercise for our brain as well. And I love that. So moving to Pilot John, what are practical things you're doing with you and yours, the people you're in the friendly or not so friendly confines, depending on the hour that you're trapped in a house with?
Oh, it's been awesome. Like I see this as an amazing place to reconnect. So let me give you 3 in different areas. I think first of all, a lot of us, I've been developing remote teams. It's something we do for 25 years. After 9/11, our entire team over 6 states had to go remote.
Okay.
I think one of the most important things you can do is get up at the same time in the morning. If it's 6 o'clock, take a shower, get dressed. Don't go down and work in your pajamas and boxers, even though nobody would ever know. I think it's about a mindset.
Good.
And so it's about going to work, have that place that you work. I think the second thing we've done as a family, and Steve talked about getting prepared, is I've doubled down on my reading in the afternoons, in the evenings. And we just read a book together as a family. We've got the kids involved. It was called Change Your Questions, Change Your Life. And then we would discuss it. It was about listening better, being more empathetic. I think reading is powerful, especially if you're doing it in a group. And then the third one, I tell you what, right now more than ever, we need to serve others. We need to reconnect. And I've been actually waking up in the morning and saying, okay, who just pops into my head? I called a woman who I haven't talked to literally in 3 years. We had about a 40-minute conversation this afternoon that was absolutely incredible. We both needed it. And so I've been trying to reach out to people by either just a quick text, a phone call, or just see if they can jump on a Zoom. 3 or 4 people a day just to reconnect, see how they're doing, not to sell them anything, but to just say, hey, how's your family? How are you doing? Anything I can do for you? And I think if we just make that a habit, when we get in our own head and we put those arrows out, focus on other people, it just changes everything, right? The level of gratitude, I think love, wholeness, whatever you want to call it, just starts to just manifest itself. And that's a good thing.
Well, That's beautiful, and it fits perfectly, because what you're talking about is being generous to these people that you're wanting to connect with, which, John, that's obviously your bread and butter. And how are you
Yep.
guys putting that or other things into play in your confines?
Yeah, well, I mean, we're fortunate to be in a position to be able to increase our budgets on the gifting side. You know, if we can, you know, as long as the mail or UPS stays open, we're going to continue to send packages, because I think everybody, you know, in Cutco, ironically enough, is still one of our top gifts that we sell from our agency side, and people are stuck at home with their families cooking 3 meals a day. Knives all of a sudden becomes a pretty interesting gift to send to people. I would say, so I would echo, you know, I'm reaching out on FaceTime to people and just having interesting conversations. I'm also taking inventory of assets that we have that I can reposition. One of them being our book. I'm positioning, you know, to take giftology and create a giftology series. And so one of the guys that wanted to partner with us wants to target casinos. And so we're negotiating right now to create the giftology for casino book, which is a huge tool for him and his 30 salespeople, but it's also a great way for us to go into a different channel with a partner, produce cash quickly. And it's a great asset for them now, and it'll be a great asset for us to leverage. So, but the exercise in the morning, I'm actually in my gym right now, looking at my sauna. I use the sauna, meditate, and exercise every morning. And do a cold shower. So Beautiful. I'm a big believer in starting the day, you know, like a champion, and you know that sets the tone for the rest of the day.
That's fantastic. So we've only got a few minutes, and I want to make sure that we all know how clearly people can get in contact with each of you. But in one, so you each get 1 minute here. One thing that has surprised you about this whole unprecedented experience. So keep it on you, John. What's one thing that has surprised you about this? Either what you learned about yourself or your family or something else.
Well, what's interesting, we have 4 dogs. One of them's a newborn. Okay. And so I'm normally traveling and doing different things. It's been interesting how difficult it is to stay home for me. And it's given me perspective on what my wife is doing every single day, all the time, taking care of our little ones. And so I have a greater appreciation and realize where I've been selfish and a sucky husband, supporting her in that, because you think, oh, staying home. Not that I always knew it was hard, but actually staying home in those 4 walls, it's amazing how claustrophobic you can get. And so I've enjoyed the extra time with my girls. We've talked about homeschooling, whether that would ever be a thing. And holy
Here
crap.
you are.
Well, it's an interesting experiment.
Right.
That's for sure. So that's been surprising to me.
That's beautiful. As a guy who's worked with marriages for 20 years, I can tell every time you say, man, I had no idea how difficult this was, to your wife, that is really sexy. Guarantee it. Incredibly sexy. And Amber's nodding over there. Absolutely. All right. So, Steve, what's one thing that has surprised you about this experience?
Well, I don't know, beyond obviously the whole COVID thing in and of itself is probably surprising to all of us, right?
Sure,
It's that once in a lifetime thing that's not in a good way.
Mm-hmm.
Other than that, not super surprised. I'm struck by some people's ability to really pivot and to adapt to this situation. And then on the negative side, I'm also still kind of like, why do some people, when it comes to customer engagement, not really get the situation they're in, not get that, your customer is not probably at the best to be receiving your new offerings that don't help them. Exactly. So, I think, we need to better think about, and the whole theme of this whole conversation I thought was great. It's all about service and gratitude and trying to be effective. And so if people would engage their customers with that spirit, I think, again, that would keep the long game in mind. It would just be better for everyone. So,
well, I hadn't met you yet, but you were in my ear yesterday when I was talking to a new coaching prospect, and I found a way to offer them something that normally times I wouldn't, but it was able to get them, and now we're gonna work together. So, John, you got the last surprise moment. I'm sorry, we run out of time, but what's the one quick thing, one thing that surprised you?
One quick thing is, I think like Steve said, not so much a surprise, but I think people kind of stepping up into a new role so quickly, right? How's that? I think
Yeah,
I think
love it.
I've been really encouraged seeing how people have almost embraced that this is an opportunity for them to actually reveal their character, and even though they might have some flaws, this is a way for them to kind of move forward, and they've kind of embraced that, which I think is pretty awesome.
That's great. Steve, John, we put your links in the comment section. Thank you guys so much for giving us generously your time. And it has been fantastic to meet you guys. And I hope we have more connections in the future.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Thank you, guys.
Hello.
Okay. So
I didn't even notice you were there. Sorry about that.
welcome. We're just coming out of another of the Elevate series, and now we're diving right in to this one. So we are live. Hi, my name is Hal Runkel, and I get the pleasure of being a guest host today because our fearless leader here, Amber, has been crying out the clarion call for people to serve and pivot so loudly that she lost her voice completely.
I did. It's true.
Wow, that's pretty
But
bad.
it's so good to see you guys.
Good to see you.
That is, yes, it's really pathetic. So, but for those of you who are just tuning in, Amber is one of the most amazing people I've met in many, many years. She lives to help other people be influential. That's what she does. And whether it's building a website or teaching your assistant to do your marketing going forward so you can actually concentrate on developing. She works with thought leaders, speakers, authors, coaches. She works with these people who have amazing intellectual property that does change lives, and she's helping them have a broader reach, more impact. And she helps with book launches as well. And what's amazing about Amber is she's modeled for us what so many of us in this world need to do, which is learn to pivot and adjust to a situation no one could have foreseen. And we are all struggling in different ways, whether it is struggling with your business or struggling with the fact that these people that you really, really love, you don't always like. And now you're seeing them a lot all around you, more than anyone had ever wanted. And so we're all doing that. But I love being around people who are trying to figure out, okay, how can I serve? How can I serve my customers? How can I serve my family? How can I change? How can I take this time to pivot myself and maybe learn some things about myself? So we have two amazing guests. So hi, Debi. How are you?
Hello, I'm great. Thanks so much for having me.
I was going to ask if that was a Zoom background, but no, that's a beautiful painting.
Thank you so much. I'm just amongst the cherry blossoms today.
That's
It's that kind of day.
Does that painting change throughout the seasons? Does it?
Not at all. Every day it's just perfect.
That's awesome. Awesome. So tell us.
There you have it.
Oh my God.
See that? You didn't have the full
That's just
effect
gorgeous.
there. Now you do. Thank you.
That is gorgeous. So Debi, tell us just a couple minutes about yourself, what you do, who you work with, and what your impact is.
Sure. Okay. Well, I'm Dr. Debi Silber, and I specialize in helping people heal physically, mentally, emotionally, psychologically, spiritually from the betrayal of a family member, partner, friend, or self. And you don't study something like betrayal unless you have to. And that was the case. That was the case with me. So it was family betrayal, and I didn't quite learn the lesson I was supposed to learn. So I got another opportunity, and that was with my husband, and sent me right into this PhD program in transpersonal psychology, the psychology of transformation and human potential. I just needed to understand how the mind works and why we do these things and how I can heal. While I was there, I did a study. I studied betrayal, what holds us back, what helps us heal, and what happens to us when the people closest to us lie, cheat, and deceive. That study led to 3 groundbreaking discoveries. Those discoveries changed my business, changed my life, changed my marriage, my family, and the rest is history.
Well, that's fantastic. And it's
Thank you.
interesting. I used to be a licensed marriage and family therapist for 15 years. And one of the things I would say is no good therapist had a good childhood.
Yeah,
Right.
for sure.
Yeah, why else would you sign up to listen to other people's trauma all day, every day, if you hadn't gone through something yourself? So, and usually those of us who are bent in this way are natural helpers, and we figure we might as well get paid for it. But
Well,
you,
that's it.
yeah, you went through trauma and betrayal. I love that you're actually trying to take that, and you even called it an opportunity.
Oh, it absolutely was, because these discoveries were so unique and so such a game changer. So I did a TEDx on it recently, and a new book coming out. But the response has just been incredible, because it's not like we haven't experienced these things. And we've heard time heals all wounds, not betrayal. And what happens is it affects every single area of life. It affects us in relationships, of course. We either put that big wall up, or like, nope, no one's getting close to us again. Or if we don't heal from it, we have repeat betrayals. The faces change, but it's the same thing. Yeah. Or in business, I see it in business all the time. We want to be a team player, but we're so afraid. The person we trusted the most proved untrustworthy. How are we going to trust a boss or a coworker? Or we want to ask for that raise or promotion, but again, our confidence was shattered. Or in health, we go to the most well-meaning health experts to manage a stress-related symptom, illness, condition, disease, and at the root of it is an unhealed betrayal.
Well, that is a perfect segue, because Don, you have become a master about handling stress, but going beyond just managing it, but actually finding a way to solve it. But I'm speaking for you, and I may have totally messed it up. So I will let you introduce yourself.
Well, my name is Dr. Don Wood. I'm really glad to be here, and thanks, Amber, for the invite. And then Hal, I'm actually have to throw one wrench into what you just said, that anybody who's in therapy has had trouble in there. I had an idyllic childhood, which was actually really fortunate for me. And that's what really led me into, because my wife, she grew up in a very traumatic childhood. And so I was always trying to figure out why she was responding the way she did, because she was high performing. If you met her, she didn't get into drugs or alcohol, but she was just living in fear. And there was nothing I could do to stop her from feeling fear. She was just constantly worried about what was going to happen. And if I could say something like, no, I don't like that, she would start to cry and say, why are you mad at me? Wow. And I would just go like, wow, like, how did you get, I was mad at you from that statement? Yeah. And what wasn't making sense to me was that she was living in the world I grew up in. I was very much like my father. I don't yell and scream. I'm very calm. And yet she could still hear fear. And what I really learned was that's led me on the research to discover why trauma is affecting us in this way. And, similar to what Debi had said as well, betrayal, all those things, if it's left unresolved, it's going to affect your health.
Sure.
And what I say is that unresolved trauma compromises our immune system and our neurotransmitters. So people are getting sicker because of the inflammation. And then they're also feeling bad because their neurotransmitters are compromised.
Right.
And so my daughter ended up with Crohn's when she was 14. Now, we didn't know why. They told us you had to change your diet, take out gluten, dairy, all these different, all these different things. And yet that wasn't solving anything. And she had 4 operations, 4 resections.
Wow.
And so that's, again, between my wife and my daughter, really led me to say, I believe it was the trauma. When she was 16, she told us about some abuse that had happened to her when she was 6, between 6 and 8. And I believe that was causing her Crohn's.
That you guys were obviously unaware of.
That we were devastated because my wife was like, I'm a hawk. She says, I thought that could never happen because it happened to her, that it could never happen to her children. And yet I believe sexual abuse in this country is a pandemic. It is everywhere.
It is so much more. There's a great organization for men called 1 in 6, because that's reflecting the stats. And even I think those are
way too low. Way
numbers.
Too low.
Right. Yep. And it is amazing how we carry trauma through our bodies, and they manifest itself. I love that we are finally seeing some signs of dissolving the whole body mind difference, that we're recognizing that we've got neurotransmitters in our stomach, right? We receptors in our stomach. Our spinal fluid is a liquid thing that it's not this separation that's just electricity. It's actually we're physically connected constantly to our thoughts, and even thoughts are actual physical things. Right?
And I would just add to that too, when you talk about gut and the issues are in the tissues, we hear that all the time. Gut issues are one of the most common physical signs of betrayal. We have this quiz to see if someone's struggling with post-betrayal syndrome, and that comes up all the time. And when you think about what the gut does, it absorbs, it digests, it processes. Isn't trauma something to mentally and emotionally absorb, digest, and process? Like, is it any wonder why the gut would be struggling? Right.
And I always say that if we got this unresolved trauma, like my daughter was looping, right? That was affecting her ability to do maintenance. So the cells go into a cell danger response. That's where the danger ended up for her, was in her gut, lower gut.
Right.
And as long as it was inflamed, it was a temporary pause to protect the integrity of the system. This is where what I call a glitch happens. And so it's designed to protect you temporarily until the danger passes. The problem is, for humans, we store explicit details about memory, about events and experiences, and they keep looping, activating our nervous system. So the danger was never passing. And similar, Debbie, what you're saying is betrayal, if it keeps looping, is going to continue to affect your mental and physical health.
I've done some work on the word resentment and how it is such a literal description. And this is what I'm thinking, hearing both of you talk, that resentment is a literal resending of a traumatic thought. So I'm walking around with this sense of injustice or betrayal or trauma, and instead of actually learning to understand it, grow through it, express what I need to express, I just resend it through my brain, and I resend it through my brain, and it grows into a resentment, which then begins to cloud and has lenses through which I see everything. It seems like you guys have taken small thoughts of mine like that and really expanded your entire practices around it. What I'm curious with this expertise that you guys have, and I'll start with you, Dr. Silber, is what about now? Is this Trump? Does this feel like betrayal? Are we experiencing when people are losing their jobs when they were promised, no, you're the one that we're going to keep through this, and now no? How widespread, and what can people do?
Sure. Well, betrayal has so many faces, and I really define it as the breaking of a spoken or unspoken rule. Okay. But what kind of rule do we have during these times? I mean, nobody could have predicted anything like this. Right. But what I found just from the research and just even in my own work is the closer we are, the more we depended, the more we trusted on the person, the bigger the betrayal. So, for example, a child who's completely dependent on a parent, right? And then the parent does something awful, that's going to have a much bigger impact than, let's say, your coworker taking credit for your idea, right? Still, it's going to have an impact, won't have the same physical, mental, emotional repercussions, you know? But I think a lot of people are feeling betrayed right now. They're feeling betrayed by expectations.
Yeah.
You know, they had a plan. Like someone posted something on Facebook, like, this wasn't on my 2020 vision board, you know? Well, they didn't say it just like that. I just cleaned that up. But, you know, but so we're betrayed by our expectations. We're betrayed by, we went into this, you know, this new year, like, okay, here we go. I'm going to blow up my business and it's going to be great. And I'm going to have the most wonderful experiences. And now it's like, what? Like we just brought I have 4 kids, and we brought one of them home from Australia. She was studying abroad. Her expectation, she was going to have this amazing experience. And a month in, we're like, nope, you're coming home. Yeah. You know? So I believe it's this betrayal of expectations, and what I see and people not doing, and we need to, there's like a little bit of a grieving process that needs to happen.
Sure.
And you're grieving the loss of what you thought you were going to get and you didn't. You're grieving what you wanted and what didn't happen. And that's healthy, because once you do, then you can say, okay, based on where I am, what can I do now? Exactly. What's available to me? What can I do with this? But it's when we, and I'll tell you, there were actually 3 groups in my study who did not heal. And one of the groups refused to accept their betrayal. And when you refuse to accept whatever your trauma is, you're just clinging to it for dear life, and the healing can't happen. So I think we have to, on whatever level we can, say, okay, this is where we are. It stinks. Be real about it.
Right.
Grieve it and say, okay, now based on where I am, based on what I have access to, what can I do now?
gotten the chance to work with the Army and Air Force, and I've gotten to make 250 plus visits to Army installations around the world. And one of my favorite phrases that they have is "embrace the suck."
Right.
You're
Yeah.
in the desert. It's 120 degrees. Your mission just went foobar. You're now waiting. You're hurrying up to wait. You don't know, and you just ran out of water. Embrace the suck, because what else are you going to do? We can't go from here until we fully understand where here is. So let's
fighting it gets you nowhere. All that does is cause such massive frustration. Your brain doesn't come up with any new thoughts or ideas when all you're doing is busy being frustrated about what didn't work, what didn't happen, what you didn't receive.
This reminds me of sort of a great analogy. It's getting caught in a riptide. If you get caught in a riptide, the worst thing you can do is try to swim back to shore.
Yeah.
Right? Because if you try to swim back to shore, you're going to get exhausted and worn out. And then by the time it tries to let you go, you have nothing left.
Yeah.
You just have to go with it, and you have to float with it. What they always say is let it take you out, but swim across, and eventually it will let you release, but just float. And so right now, the best advice for people is just to, as we're going along, just float, right? Yeah. Things are going to change eventually. They're going to get better. It's just right now, the uncertainty is where all the stress is coming in, and nobody has any answers.
Right. And that's the thing to fully embrace, is the uncertainty. My wife and I have been remarking about how slow time is crawling by every day. And it's because we don't know from 1 hour to the next what bad news or weird news are we going to hear. And I don't know. I can't remember a time where it's ever just crawled by like this. And so I like the idea of, okay, so how do we just allow ourselves to float, knowing all that we don't know? Like we just learned the Wuhan is going to stop their lockdown on April 8th, which is great news. And we're all anxious to see does it come back when they open their borders and all that stuff. But they started January 23rd. So New York City is not on that severe a lockdown. They're on lockdown, but they're not on near as severe. And I don't think we ever will. That's one of the difficulties, is because we don't live in a communist country that has QR codes on everybody's phone and track them and make them lock down. But can New York City handle 10 weeks?
Well,
I don't think so.
I'll tell you, I live in New York, not the city, but it's it's testing everybody for sure. It's testing their patience, and New Yorkers don't have a whole lot of patience anyway on a good day. So it's really testing some patience. But what I have to say, I am seeing the best in humanity. I really am. And we could focus on how slow things are moving, and they are, and we can focus on how bad it is and how uncertain, and that's true. But I'm also seeing that it's giving people time to have some real conversations that they normally wouldn't have. I mean, people are using their phone and their computers for good, like just what you're doing. Here we are having this Facebook Live to teach, to share. I mean, people are just in my health and wellness community I'm a part of. It's like, hey, who can help? You need something? What can I do? Let me go into your community and serve. Beautiful. And I'm seeing so much of that. And it's really giving people an opportunity to just, if they were uncomfortable being vulnerable, they're getting over it and they're doing it anyway. If they felt like they had nothing to offer, they're figuring it out and they're doing something, reaching out. And it's really nice to see.
Oh, that's beautiful. Because you go, Dr. Wood.
I was just also going to say, one of the things I thought it's important to do is to also give yourself permission to say, I just don't know.
Yeah.
And to even people that you know and care and love, is to be able to say, I don't know what's going to happen, right?
Right.
But I know we'll end up being okay.
Yeah.
So, because they're always looking for the leaders, but the best leader, I always use the analogy of Captain Sully, who landed that plane in the Hudson River. He didn't really know for sure he was going to do it, but he certainly stayed calm, which allowed him to land the plane. Had he become unnerved and rattled, he would have had difficulty putting that plane and landing in the river. So the advice I always give to people when they're in that kind of a situation is just land the plane. That's all you have to do.
I love that. And I love the idea. It's interesting you said about, I don't know, is because I'm writing a blog post right now on the miracle of those 3 words. I don't know. The only way change ever happens is if you stop trying to do what you have been doing, because your new problem, it was probably created by your attempts to solve it in a wrong way. So start with, I don't know. But you can actually, I've been on the phone with so many business leaders over the last week and a half or so, and they're trying to sound decisive as leaders, but helping them see, well, you can still be decisive sounding while you're saying, I don't know. You can actually it actually creates a sense of comfort when your leader is calmly and assuredly saying what he or she is not sure of. You know what? I'm not sure. But then you can follow it up just like you did, Dr. Wood. You can follow it up with, but I do know I trust everybody in the room. I do know
Exactly.
we got the right people. I wouldn't want to be making these decisions without anybody else, or I wouldn't want to be trapped in a house with anyone else.
Exactly. And we'll figure it out. We're a very, creative species. We'll figure out the solution to this.
Right.
But it's just going to take time. And the reason it takes time is because we don't know what we're dealing with.
Right.
And that's why I say it's okay to say, I don't know. Even the greatest scientists in the world don't know yet what they're dealing with, but they will figure it out.
We're used to watching a CSI episode where we have on the back of our minds, it is going to reach a conclusion by the end of this
minutes.
hour, right? So it is going to. So we're okay with living in the mystery because we know that's coming. But we don't know when this is coming. But I love that you're emphasizing, but it will, because that's what we human beings do. But Dr. Silber, when I was listening to you, I was thinking, well, what we're needing to do is something only human beings can do, which is hold two seemingly competing ideas in juxtaposition. So it is this combination of, on the one hand, embrace the suck, right? We are going through something that feels like betrayal. We're going through something that is traumatic. Let's admit it. And at the same time, let's observe how amazing humans can be and all the ways that people are stepping up. And it's not negating the suck. It's just, can we hold on to them side by side?
I think it's an amazing time for creativity, and the leaders that I'm seeing are showing up. They're being very creative with how they're showing up, what they're offering, what they're bringing. And there are so many dynamics to this too, because I really feel that sometimes the best ideas emerge out of, when there is that standstill, there is that, it's like the dust settling, and it's this intense place of confusion and uncertainty, but that's where the best stuff comes from. And there's an analogy, and it's in my book that's coming out soon. And I said, it's almost like, let's say you're running as fast as you can, and you're running, and all of a sudden you realize, oh my gosh, this is the total wrong direction. And you've been running that way for a really long time. Think about what happens. You slow down, you stop, you pivot, then you run in a different direction. This time period, or the time period after a crisis or something, is that stop, pivot. And we feel very confused during that time. But look at what happens when you stop, pivot, and run in a different direction. What comes out of all these times is this new clarity, this new direction that you didn't have access to because you were so busy running.
Right.
With maybe even without thinking. So there's something really beautiful about that stop, pivot, because you're going to take off in another direction, and that direction may serve you so much better.
Sure.
This also reminds me, that's a great way of saying it. What I think about too is when President Kennedy announced that we were going to put a man on the moon before the end of the decade. Nobody had any idea what he was talking about, including NASA. They looked at each other and said, "What? We have no technology to do that." Right. But when he said it, we did it. Right. That's the ingenuity that we have. And we're going to do the same thing in this. Right. So we don't need to, he didn't have an answer. If anybody had pressed him right then and said, what's the technology to do that? He would have said, I don't know.
But if we had waited until we had the technology and then set out the goal, we would have never developed the technology.
Yep.
But I also see how now we're building the character, we're building the strengths, we're building the, what we need to show up so much more powerfully. So whatever will be created as a result of this, we'll have what we need to see it through.
Yeah, I love that.
Absolutely.
Faith in our ability to create. And that is what we do. That is when we are at our best. I love how you mentioned it. My wife is actually a creativity coach, and that's what she helps is people take usually to writing as a way of writing themselves out of being stuck in a certain situation. And it's beautiful because it taps into these things that truly make us human. That you talked about the stop and the pivot. One of the things I'm fascinated by the neocortex is that it allows us to pause consider principles that might be applied to this situation and then take a different way. And no other creature can do that kind of pause. But you think about it, it even enables us to defy physics. Every action has an equal opposite reaction, except with human beings. Because human beings can actually choose to not react in the way they were acted upon. They can choose to respond differently. It's the miracle of Gandhi, for instance. And it's so time. I've heard the word say, the pause button has actually been my logo for 15 years. It's my business card. It's really popular now because everyone's forced to take a pause. But I was going with your image, Dr. Silber, and you're running the wrong direction and then you stop and then you look around, and every time you do that, you notice things you hadn't seen before.
And think about how often do we actually stop and we're present, we're mindful about how we're living, what we're doing, how we're showing up, right? This is why, we're so busy, so many of us numbing, avoiding, distracting. We use things like food and drugs, alcohol, work, TV, keeping busy, reckless behavior, anything so we don't feel, so we don't face. And I talk about this in my first TEDx. It's almost like, remember how when you were a kid, and if someone said something you didn't want to hear, you'd stick your fingers in your ears, you'd say, la, 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 I don't hear you. When we use food, drugs, alcohol, it's the adult version of that same game. That's all we're doing. So there's something about, we're being forced to stop and face. And I say, face it, feel it, heal it. And that's the beauty of it, because avoiding it will just follow you around like a shadow. And now we have a time, and we have the opportunity to say, okay, what needs my attention, and how can I address this, and slay those dragons, face all those demons, and come out the other side.
So, Dr. Wood, what are you finding that is working among you and yours, the people you are stuck in the friendly confines with? What are you finding from your profession that's actually helping, and what can other people who are watching this put into play in their own family?
Well, I think this is an opportunity. I'm an eternal optimist. I've always been an eternal optimist all my life. So I also say that there's these new opportunities that are going to come from this.
We're going to learn childhood, right?
My idyllic childhood.
Exactly.
Yes.
That's beautiful.
I never had any trauma. I was very fortunate. I had parents that never raised their voice, never hit us.
Wow.
And so everything for me just sort of worked out. So I wrote in my book, I worked with a professional golfer, and I said to him, do you think you need to be confident to play good golf? And he goes, well, yeah, I think I do. And I said, what if I told you didn't have to be confident to play good golf? He says, well, what do I need? And I said, confidence will come and go. I says, if you build your game on your confidence, I said, I can tell you you're going to lose it at times. I said, you have a skill. I said, you have a very unique skill. You can hit a ball anywhere on a golf course and get out of trouble. I said, so if you put confidence in front of skill, then you're going to be relying on your confidence as opposed to your skill. And he said, well, I said, so if you hit a ball and the wind comes, but you didn't feel the wind, and that ball ends up in the bunker, what's going to happen to your confidence?
Yeah.
I says, but you've got a skill. You can get out of a bunker. That's not even a penalty to you. And I said, what I want you to do is I want you to develop an attitude of optimism, that there's nothing on a golf course that you can't conquer. And the same thing with this is what I tell to people, that this coronavirus is not something we can't conquer. It's a temporary setback in order for us to develop new opportunities. That's all it is. And so this is a time now to clean out your closet. I'm cleaning out my closet. I'm catching up on paperwork. I'm writing new stuff. So that's what the opportunity. So you can see it as an opportunity, or you can sit back and wait for everybody else to do something. I see this as an opportunity for action.
I love that. Love that. My wife was telling me she went to our storage unit because we're starting to clean stuff out, and we're going to clean out the storage unit as well. We've got a lot of time on our hands. And she said when she went to the storage unit, it's all dark until you get in front of the motion sensors that turn the lights on. But she said you have to start walking down a pitch black hallway before the light comes on.
Right.
You can't wait for the light. And what's interesting is it's not just because eventually the light will come on. No, it is actually her action that creates the light coming on. So she was saying how action actually creates clarity. And I think that fits totally with what you were saying, Dr. Wood, is we can wait for a feeling to come that will motivate us, or we can just take action. And usually the feelings come right afterwards. And so, Dr. Silber, I'm curious about, obviously you work with betrayal, and you talked about earlier about how people are feeling betrayed by these expectations. Do you see this as an opportunity for people to begin letting go of some of those expectations of the way they need life to be?
Definitely. It's a beautiful time to do it, because if you're struggling with your betrayal, whatever your betrayal is, from a family member, a coworker, a friend, partner, self, and now you're dealing with being stuck and feeling quarantined and all that goes with that. I mean, it's just too many emotions to deal with. So, I'd say the best thing, the simplest thing, it's not, it's not that it's simple, but
it's simple, but it's not easy, maybe.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's going for some kind of progress. I think as long as we're doing something that makes us feel like we're doing something, that's good. And you mentioned cleaning out the closets. I did that the other day. It felt great.
Yeah.
It didn't help my business at all, but it was a wonderful thing. I'm like, okay, you know what? Let me just go move away from business for a while. What else can I do? And whatever the area is in life, or in your health or in your relationships, what can you do just to have a sense of progress? Because you're only moving in one of two directions. You're moving further or closer away from the body, health, lifestyle you want. So if you did no more than just say, okay, I'm taking an action towards what I want in any area, what would it be? So then we can use this time to say, okay, you know what? I'm just ticking away and moving, just inching closer, because without awareness, without a plan, you just, default just sets you back. So
I love it. And I'm always thinking of book ideas, and then I don't actually write them. I've only written 3 in 12 years, but I've not written like 10 others. But I'm thinking, hearing you talk, there's a phrase I've used in my coaching called "trust the progress." I don't like "trust the process," because that, I like the idea that, you're inching towards. So I love what you're saying. You're either inching towards it or you're going away from it, upward spiral or downward spiral. But trusting the progress and marking some territory, because you can say, well, I didn't get to work out today because my gym crashed. Did you do push-ups? Yeah, I did some push-ups. Great. Trust the progress.
That's it. And my new book's called Trust Again. So
there you go. I love it. There you go. I love it. And counting on, I did do something. And that goes back to the action you were speaking of, Dr. Wood, is I can do something. There's always chance to do something.
Exactly. And this is a great opportunity. Like I said, look at it as an opportunity. What are the things that you haven't had time to do? And that's even spending time with family members, right? And doing things like that. There's all kinds of things that we can do. This is just going to be a different time. We've never experienced this. I mean, we live in Florida, so we get,
I'm guessing, hurricanes and natural disasters.
get the hurricanes every. Yep.
Yeah.
So Florida's sort of a little more used to this when that sort of comes along, except the stores are still out of all paper towels, toilet paper, and water. That's usually what happens.
Yeah. And my daughter, until yesterday when she got laid off from her job, but she worked for a startup that sells these amazing recycled home goods. And she was getting so frustrated, people buying bottled water. She's like, it's not a hurricane. We're not going to lose water. Right? You're just buying plastic. What are you doing? It is interesting how our reactive reptilian parts of our brains take over, and we start hoarding stuff we don't actually need. But there's no need to do that. You can take it as an opportunity to learn things about yourself. And I'm curious. So you mentioned, Dr. Wood, so we got 10 minutes, 11 minutes. So you had talked about the difficulty of living with someone who could not let go of negative emotions or would read into things. And one of the things I'm curious about, this experiment we're all going in, I've always thought that too much togetherness can be just as dangerous as too much separateness in a relationship, especially if you're around people who you cannot make them feel a better way, or you cannot make them feel better. So I'm curious, any strategies for how do you respect the people that you're living with, and the fact that you're not always going to be feeling the same level of optimism at the same time? Any strategies to help with that?
I think really the key, and this is what I talk about, our whole program is all built on, is that I always say that there's nothing wrong with anybody's mind. Everybody's mind works perfectly fine. What's interfering with our ability to stay present and in the moment? And what I say, what's causing that is this looping of trauma. So things that have happened, experiences earlier in their life that they keep looping through. And any time anything looks or sounds similar to that, their mind does a Google search. What does this look like? Have I experienced this before? There's something called the time slice theory that I talk about, where the subconscious mind is actually viewing all the incoming data 400 milliseconds before you're even consciously aware of it. And what's happening in that 400 milliseconds is it's doing its Google search. Then it goes into our explicit memory and starts pulling up a whole bunch of data about events and experiences in our life, which then create an emotional response. So what I say is anytime you have an emotion, a feeling, a sensation, or a thought, your mind is calling for an action. It wants you to do something. The purpose of fear is to escape a threat. The purpose of anger is to attack a threat. So if you think about something that happened to you 10 years ago and you feel fear, it's a glitch. Your mind is actually seeing it in real time, calling for an action to do something about it. That's why people are experiencing all this dysregulation of their nervous system. So the key is to get their mind, to reset that information so it stops calling for the action. And that's what we do. So we've seen people eliminate post-traumatic stress, PTSD, panic attacks, anxiety attacks, because the mind stops filtering through that old information and calling for responses. If there's a current situation that's a threat, then it makes sense for your mind to call for that action.
Sure. Yeah, that's why it's there.
But for what would happen to my wife is when I used to think it was when I said, no, I don't like that she was responding to that. What in fact she was responding to was that her mind could hear the slight inflection change in my voice. And what her mind would be saying is, what do I know about what happens when men start to get angry, right? And this flood of data would be coming in to her nervous system and then would be screaming for her to run, that she was in danger. But consciously, she knew she wasn't in danger, but she couldn't stop that reaction because of the flood of data.
Yeah, it's echoing your slight inflection, your tone change is echoing what she had heard some point in her past, and that had led to a terrible experience. And so how do you turn off the echo?
Right. And so that her mind would be saying, what do we know about this kind of an experience? And it was Google search would bring in tons of information about being hurt by her father. And yet I used to think it was what I said, and it wasn't what I said. It was all the other flood of data coming in. That's what we need to resolve. And that's what we need to fix. And we can. Right? We're designed to heal.
I like that a lot. So Dr. Silber, my similar question is, all right, you got all these people who are living together in close confines, some people in total lockdown, and that might be all of us soon. And some of these people that you're living with have betrayed you in the past, but now you're with them. You're stuck with them. So something we can do to survive this.
It's very hard. What I would absolutely suggest, it takes a few things. Number one, it takes respecting each other's space. Respect each other's space. It's like after a betrayal, you need that time in that space. And if you're forced now to be quarantined, well, at least have some space for yourself. You need that. Respect each other's boundaries. If someone doesn't want to talk, if they don't want to sit with you on the couch, if they don't want to have that meal with you, this is about respect right now. But it also, on the other side of that, it doesn't have to be that the person's betrayed you. It's just that we're all confined together. Empathy and compassion. Empathy. I mean, I think empathy it's like the glue for everything. People want to feel heard. People want to feel understood. Sure. And just
more than they want to be helped. They want
absolutely
to be heard.
That's it. So just being empathetic and just knowing that person needs to know. I mean, because they're feeling fearful, anxious, afraid, and they want to be met with someone who gets it, who understands. So even if they haven't experienced it, here's another analogy for you. It's like if you're down in the trenches, you don't want someone up at the top like, hey, how's it going down there?
Yeah.
You want someone to say, hey, I got you, and let me help pull you up. So that's to me what empathy is. Empathy is I'm with you. I hear you. I'm with you. I got you. empathy, compassion, respect for space, and respect for boundaries.
And one of the things about space is not just spatial. We're not talking just physical space, but there's emotional space. It's also, firm believer, great family teamwork is built playing one-on-one, meaning let's strengthen the one-on-one connection. So not everybody has to play the game on family night. We can allow for individuality within these. Are there times when we're all going to do the same thing? Yes, but don't insist on those. When our son moved back in, right when his college closed down, that was a lot earlier, and we're really used to our empty nest. And so here's a 20-year-old man now living with us, and suddenly the groceries we thought would last 6 weeks are going to last like 2. But normal, and so he's still technically on spring break. His virtual classes haven't even started yet, and so he's sleeping till noon. Well, normally that would have I would be irked by that, but right now I'm like, oh, that's beautiful, because now it's like we have some overlap time, but we're on different shifts, so we can have some alone time even when we have some together time, but it's not all together all the time. So Dr. Wood, I'm wondering one thing that you would suggest to everybody watching here that they can do so that this actually can be an opportunity season. What's just one thing to put on, a lens to put on, a thought or an activity?
The lens that I would say, and this is something I always talk to people about, is to develop understanding. That people can't be any different than they are at that moment based on the way their mind is actually filtering through their own events and experiences. So when you apply understanding, the great part about understanding is it's not forgiveness. Understanding is I don't have to be okay with it, right? I don't have to let them off the hook. They're still responsible for their behavior. But if you apply understanding that something happened in their life or they're experiencing something individually, that they're going to respond in a certain way that has really nothing to do with you. It has to do with more than the way they're responding. So if you can step back and say, let's give them the space to expand a little bit, right? Without going right back at them, because then that's just, if they activate you, the communication is gone.
Sure.
Understanding.
If you allow yourself to get triggered by whatever they're saying, then you're not understanding them.
Yep. So it's just take that deep breath, apply understanding that they're saying, you can even say, I understand that you're upset right now. Is there anything I can do to help you? Right.
Nice.
And that, because help is such a powerful word.
It can't, absolutely. And I love that. So this image just popped in my head. So we've seen recording stars laying down their vocal track in a tiny little booth, kind of like the one I'm in now. And they always have their headset on one ear like this. Because they are having to listen to what the music that they're trying to be in harmony with, they have to listen to it and understand it. But at the same time, they've got to hear themselves so that they can be in tune with themselves. And that was the image that just came to mind is I'm having a conversation with myself while I'm having a conversation with you, so that I can truly listen to what you're saying and then calm myself down to not get triggered by what you're saying and remind myself, this is the chance to understand and listen. You don't have to automatically react. You don't have to react. And so that was just popped in my head. And I love the framework of understanding.
I always talk about that too, in terms of it's the words and the music, right? Sometimes the music is really nice, but the lyrics are terrible. It's just the person saying it the wrong way. So if you can separate the words from the music and you apply that understanding and say, I don't think they really meant that, right? It just came across wrong, right?
Sure.
That's just a great way. And that's applying understanding.
Well, one is something my wife has taught me is say, okay, the way I just heard you say that made it hard for me to really hear it. Is there another way you could say it?
Right.
And just give another chance to come up to the plate and okay, I'll think through my words carefully, because somehow my tone and my words just didn't match. So Dr. Silber, one thing for our viewers to take away with is, how do we live with these people who have hurt us and we have hurt? So one lens, one tip, something that can actually turn this into an opportunity.
I would say this is probably not what you'd see coming, but play this out. Play this out. It's after it's over. We're all healthy and well. This is behind us. We're an older version of ourselves, and we're looking back on how we showed up.
Yeah.
How do you want to show up?
Yeah.
How do you want to be remembered for how you were and who you were during this time?
That's beautiful.
Be that now.
and begin with that end in mind, as Dr. Covey would say. Yeah, I love that. Well, gosh, I have loved this conversation, and I want it to continue well beyond this. Kind of want each of you guys to be my therapist right now. And that would be great, and I would grow so much. Amber, thank you so much for doing this work of bringing people together. This is your example of turning into an opportunity, and even reaching out for others to sub for you while you're struggling. And I just love that example that you've set for us, and thanks for bringing us together. So ways to get in touch with each of you are in the comments, that section. Is that correct, Amber? And I hope we get to connect soon. For everybody else out there, this has been Elevate. Turn in tomorrow for more in this series designed for all of us to rise above this situation, find things about ourselves, and live out our best selves through this wild time that we happen to be in. So, peace,
Thank you so much.
everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Guys.